Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk about the problems with alt tech, the 5 big problems with alt tech. Now, this matters to me because I don't keep my political opinions to myself and I don't espouse the proper political opinions, let's say, for the mainstream big tech sites such as YouTube, Facebook. And so the health of alt tech is a particular concern to me. I want to talk about the problems with alt tech and why alt tech will always have a problem, at least with the current way that it's set up, to really get a good liftoff off the ground and capture a meaningful market share away from the hegemon companies like Facebook and Google. If you don't know what alt tech is, these are alternatives to, say, Facebook. You have Minds, Twitter, you have Gab, YouTube, you have things like BitChute. These are the sites that are not the main hegemons of the industry where everyone uses Facebook, but then there's this alternative that's like Facebook. That is alt tech. So here's the big problem with alt tech. The one that really just is the biggest problem, the one that is seemingly insurmountable and creates really all the others. And that is the fact that tech companies are technical monopolies, or in some cases, technical duopolies or oligopolies. Now, if you don't know what a technical monopoly is, a really short definition is a monopoly which arises naturally through the processes of the market because a single provider is more efficient economically than many providers. A really simple example would be, say, roads, right? You have one road probably in front of your house. You don't really have enough land space for a bunch of competing neighborhood roads, which means you have to have some sort of monopoly that manages the roads. You have to form a company with your neighbors, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you just take care of the road right in front of your house if you were to not have a road company. But really, these are systems that it's really not possible to have lots of different ones. Same thing with phones, right? Why do you end up with one local phone company? Because you can't have 30 companies putting their phone lines into your house. You would just have phone lines crisscrossing the sky in every direction. It would be unmanageable. So these are things that are technical monopolies. And the reason they are technical monopolies really has to do with the fact that they are not a single product. Rather, they are a standard. And consumers prefer fewer standards over more standards. The example I'm going to give you to try to explain this is, say, a VCR. If you buy a VCR, it's easy to think of a VCR as a product, but a consumer buying a VCR is not buying a VCR. Rather, they are buying something which allows them to play videotapes. That is, they are buying access to movies. Now, if you grew up after the age of videotapes, you could think of this as like a streaming service. You buy the streaming service because it has the movies that you want to watch on it, not because you like to see the Netflix logo or something like that. So if you're buying a videotape machine, you want it to be able to play all the movies. You're buying access to movies. VHS was one standard in that market. And one of the other standards back in the 80s was what's called Beta or Betamax. And Betamax was, I think, Sony's, and VHS was, I don't remember who had VHS, but VHS won. And one of the reasons VHS won, there were many reasons why VHS won, but once VHS became the dominant form, it was inevitable. Because if you're making videotapes, well, you don't want to waste resources making Betamax videotapes if not everyone has a Betamax video player. You want to make all VHS tapes because everyone has a VHS. Even though VHS was inferior visual and audio quality compared to the beta tapes, VHS won simply because it becomes a self-perpetuating thing. It's a technical monopoly. The standard becomes a technical monopoly. VHS becomes the dominant one because it is the dominant one. So if you're going to buy a video player, you're going to buy VHS because everyone else has VHS. You can share your videotapes with others. All the people who make videotapes, pre-recorded videotapes for you to buy, are going to put it on VHS because more people have VHSs. See how it works? It becomes a self-perpetuating system. It's like a stampede or a snowball. It just rolls bigger and bigger. So when you begin this sort of battle, like the format wars, is it Blu-ray or is it HD DVD? When one wins, it wins 100% of the market. It's winner take all. And you see this with standards pretty much across the board. You have console wars that basically split up the market maybe into two or three different camps at most, and it's pretty tough going to have more than that because consumers are trying to buy access to games. They're not trying to buy a Nintendo just because they like the shape of the Nintendo. Rather, the Nintendo grants them access to what they actually want, which is games. So the Nintendo becomes the standard of what you're talking about here. So with the tech companies, Facebook is a standard. It's a standard of social media that is longer format social media with picture sharing and microblogging and everything that Facebook does. It's not about the color blue or that you like the interface or something. In fact, I can't think of a website where more people have complained about the interface besides maybe MailChimp and how much worse the MailChimp interface has gotten over the last couple of years than Facebook. Facebook has, I've now in 2021, I've seen 10 years worth of complaints about Facebook's interface getting worse and worse. It started off as a chronological list of status, and now it's mixed up so that you can't see what you want to see on Facebook. That's by design, so they can show you more ads, get you flipping through things longer on the site to try to see what you want to see and spending more time on the site. That's all by design. But they're only able to do that because Facebook achieved the hegemon status. It became a technical monopoly of that format. Now, if you were wanting to use social media, you're like, I'm going to use social media. Let me get on Minds. Minds.com. You go over there and you're like, where's my friends? Your friends are on Facebook. So where do you go? You go to Facebook because what you're trying to get is access to socialize with your friends. You're trying to buy into the interface that allows you to have social media contact with your other friends. So if your friends are not on Minds, there's no reason to use Minds. If your friends are not on Gab, there's no reason to use Gab. You're going to use Twitter instead. So you're going to go to whatever social media platform is going to allow you to do what you want. And so that's the main thing, is that because you're in a technical monopoly, it's almost impossible. Once, however, if you make a product that people start shifting over, then you have that, say, MySpace to Facebook, where everybody jumped off of MySpace and jumped onto Facebook because it switched. People end up liking that product and everyone's over there. You just stop using MySpace and you end up using the other product. People will, when someone gets booted off of YouTube, they won't load up the other website, some other website the person's on to watch their videos. They'll just not watch their videos anymore because they don't want to open up another website. YouTube is what it is. It becomes inconvenient to have more than one. So they're technical monopolies, and I'm not going to address what you have to do with them in this. It's really why alt tech is not as viable an option for most people, at least content creators like me, as you might think. So that's number one. Number two is that alt tech doesn't create a meaningfully differentiated product. When you had that switch over from MySpace to Facebook, now over 10 years ago, I think, Facebook was a meaningfully different product from MySpace. It was close enough people could grasp what they were doing with Facebook, but it was so much better, at least with its original versions, than MySpace. Everybody wanted to jump on board and get it. Everybody switched over because it was a better product, and it was a product everyone liked better and liked to do more time with it. And it only took a couple friends to interact with for people to want to hop over to Facebook because they didn't have thousands of MySpace friends that they were interacting with on a weekly basis. They weren't quite as rooted. Lots of things that allowed that transition to happen. The main thing was that Facebook was a different product. But what you get with a lot of the alt tech products, and this is not saying anything bad against the people who design these, is that they are really based on the already established hegemonic tech companies' products. So Minds really is a Facebook without your friends. If you were to look at something like Gab is really just Twitter. It's Twitter, but you won't get kicked off of Gab for having an opinion to the right of Mao. The BitChute is basically YouTube. YouTube is really simple. It's just videos with some ads maybe, right? So YouTube is a really simple product to understand, but people don't want to go to many different sites to get their social media user generated videos like this one. They want to go to one site to do it. So maybe Odyssey will be good. People have been asking me to form an account over there. Maybe I will. People are not wanting to spend their time on YouTube, giving their money and their attention to YouTube, which I totally understand. That is also why I have a BitChute channel and have the alternatives to YouTube available for people who choose that for their own reasons. Now, you may not harm YouTube because YouTube already operates at a loss to not use YouTube anymore, but it may be better for you to not use YouTube. So you can do it for you. That's the same reason when it comes to canceling Disney Plus or something. You are the main beneficiary if you can turn your back on a product like Facebook. I just don't use Facebook anymore. So that's not a meaningfully differentiated product. So the normies are not really going to jump over that. It brings me to number 3, which is there's no normies. So the people who are attracted to alt tech sites like mine's are people who are a bit more, shall we say, dissident compared to your standard normal person, your normie. Normies on Facebook like to share pictures of their kids and silly memes from 8 years ago. They don't like to talk about hardline political stuff and spout out their political beliefs and have a bunch of arguments with strangers. That's more something that people want to do on Twitter. And going to Minds to do that, they wouldn't go over to Minds because, well, number one, all their friends are already there because of the monopoly thing, as I said. But in order for you as a content creator to want to invest time in a social media platform, creating content that people enjoy and want to interact with, there have to be people there to interact with it. And the basis of that is normal people. It's normal people wanting to see the content that they want to see, not like political dissidents, hanging out on a weird website where they're allowed to say what they want to say. Now, there might be a market to that. That might be like your specific market if you're like a, I don't know, really, if that's your brand is really hard in that direction, then that might be a good environment for you. But for most content creators, you're just looking at nobody's on the other sites. And again, it kind of rolls downhill. Facebook's basically a monopoly on the product that is like Facebook. So everyone's on Facebook, which means if you're not on Facebook, you're not talking to anyone. You have to talk to a lot of people if you want to actually do this as any kind of business or to grow your brand or anything like that. And I do this as a business. It's part of my business. Writing books is part of my business. Making music is part of my business. Hanging out on YouTube and making videos is part of my business. So if I were to abandon YouTube because YouTube bad, I'm basically abandoning making video content because I'm not going to talk to anyone else on the other sites compared to, 40,000 plus subscribers on YouTube. So when you go to alt tech and if you leave the main site behind, you're just losing out. You're just agreeing to not do it. Same thing with Amazon. Amazon is, if you are selling books, you must sell them through Amazon. If you are not selling them through Amazon, you are reducing your sales potential by 90% plus, up to 90 to 100%. People buy so few ebooks off of other sites besides Amazon. You may be one of the people that does, but when I look at the numbers, it's like if I go wide with the book, 99% of my sales are still through Amazon. Amazon is, even though the algorithm is basically broken at this point, that's where all the sales occur. So if you're not on Amazon as an author, then you really aren't selling books. So when people are like, if you want to put your money where your mouth is, you should get off of Amazon. It's like you're just asking me to not be in the business. Same thing with YouTube. If YouTube is really bad, you should not use YouTube. Well, then you're asking me to not talk to anybody. You're asking me to not make videos that anyone watches because no one's on the other side to watch those. Okay. So that's the reality, is that there's no normies, which means there's no one to talk to. Normies are the basis of any social media platform. Number 4 is that these are actually digital ghettos. This is a much more dystopian black pill kind of thing. But, there was an agent that I saw making the rounds on Twitter and Gab, got fired for having a Gab account. So she got fired. She was a literary agent. Now, I'm not big on literary agents. That's a whole different discussion. But she's a literary agent. She lost her job merely for having a Gab account. Now, she didn't really post a lot of stuff on it. She didn't come out as a Trump supporter and therefore earn her punishment of getting fired because she happened to vote along with 70 million other people for Donald Trump, right? She merely had an account on Gap. That allowed the more lefty people who ran her company to quickly identify her as a dissident and fire her. So you end up in a digital ghetto, which means basically that you get isolated into an area where there is no one to talk to, as I mentioned, and it's also very easy to identify everyone who's there. So if you have an account on these alt tech sites, which I do, I have a Gab account, then that becomes an identifying marker for economic isolation, meaning an employer will fire you, an employer will refuse to hire you because you're on the alt tech sites. They'll go look up your normal social media to see what you're doing, and if you keep that clean, but then you like to have your Gab account for your spicy hot takes, they're like, you have a Gab account, we can't have you work for us. So it becomes a digital way of ghettoizing anybody that is to the right of Mao. I like to use that a lot, to the right of Mao, because that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about people who are like right-wing extremists. Right-wing extremists now just means normal person who doesn't buy the woke playbook. Non-death cultist. That is, those are the people who are going to be put into the digital ghettos, and it expands. And so it's like you got to play nice. You got to post the right things on Facebook and not spend any time on Gab, or you will not be allowed to have your job. So digital ghettos. Number 5, meaningful competition is actually shut down by the big tech cartels, and this is a big one. This is the one of the biggest ones to overcome. People are not aware that all of these companies work in concert to suppress political speech and to attack anyone who dares compete with them. You can look at Andrew Torba as an example. He's the founder of Gab. Gab had their hosting revoked multiple times. You know, a host would say, well, we're just not going to host your website anymore, even though we have a contract with you. We'll just break it because we're in the moral right to break our contracts with the evil Gab, who allows evil Nazis to post online whatever they're posting, right? So if you make a free speech platform, you are going to attract the dissonance, and then they're going to boot you off your hosting. You're going to have your bank account closed. People will have to mail you checks so you can buy physical servers so that you can continue to have Gab.com. Think about how difficult and what an uphill battle it is just to have Gab.com exist. If you're Andrew Torba, and you're not allowed to even interact in the economy like a normal person. You can't even have a bank account. You can't have PayPal. You can't have processors. You can't have any kind of payment processors be able to work with you. So PayPal bans you. Your bank won't give you any wire transfers. All that stuff goes out the window. You can't do credit card payments. Visa bans you. All of the things necessary to run an online economy kick you out of it, which means you can't exist on the online economy. And people think that this is okay. There's people who think, oh, this is just the free market. The free market is not all the biggest mega corporations conspiring to completely economically isolate and destroy small individuals who dare compete with them. That's not really free market so much as that is like mercantilism. That's like a cartel. So your meaningful competitors are going to get shut down by the cartel. You saw this recently with Parler, is that Amazon just revoked their hosting. So if you have, as soon as people are like, well, screw you, I'm leaving you, I'm going to go to this other alt tech one, then they just shut it down. And then they if you were on the other one, well, they'll just ban you from the first one maybe. And it's like, who are you going to tell? It's like, you have to go onto the social media websites like YouTube to even talk about alt tech. Like I could talk about alt tech on alt tech, but no one's listening. And if enough people start listening, they shut it down. That's what you're dealing with there. So those are the problems with alt tech. This is not a problem with the companies, the alt tech companies. They're not bad companies. But this is the reality of the situation when it comes to using alt tech as a content creator, and why it's usually disadvantageous for me to emphasize alt tech versus the hegemons, why it's difficult to use it as a user and maybe dangerous as a user, and why these companies are going to have a really hard time, have had a hard time, and will continue to have a hard time trying to just simply exist and compete with the main hegemonic companies, Google and Facebook and Apple and these other ones. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say today. It all starts from the idea that these are standards, not so much products, but standards which grant you access to things you want, which is going to be having social interactions with other people, specific people that you want to have interactions with. And it all kind of snowballs downhill from there. And you end up with a technical monopoly or a hegemon that's able to exert economic influence over other companies to prevent competition. That's where we're at. So anyway, that's the problem with alt tech. Thanks so much for sitting through this now 20-minute video. I really appreciate your time and attention. Leave me your thoughts down below, especially with any potential solutions you see coming your way. People have lots of great ideas for, like, how do you get around payment processors? Well, you have crypto and things like that. These are all really good ideas. The problem is when you're missing the normies, Normies don't use the crypto that much. You end up basically, the alternative has to be limited to some very tech savvy people, and getting normies involved in that process and getting them used to doing really things that are outside the mainstream is the really hard part there. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great one.